Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Lyle.
And I'm Jessica Francis.
And welcome to Voices from the Field, a podcast brought to you by the Department of Sport Management at the University of Florida. This podcast was created to share the career journeys of sport industry professionals. Our hope is that you learn the ins and outs of different sport industry professions. We are excited to be with all of you this week and with our special guest, Sara Toussaint, sports marketer and co-owner of the North Carolina Courage.
Sara is not only the co-owner of the Courage, a National Women's Soccer League team, she's also a partner at Underdog Venture Team, which is a new social impact enterprise that offers strategic marketing services. They also invest in underrepresented founders in sports, entertainment, and wellness. She's also a board member of the Hispanic-owned sports consultancy and athlete management agency that represents global soccer talent called the Marketing Jersey. Sara has an extensive background and expertise in brand marketing, strategic sponsorships, fan engagement, and communications. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago and her MBA from New York University's Business School. We are thrilled to have her here with us today. Well, welcome, Sara.
Hey, friends. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to be with you and just hear about your career journey. So if you want to start us, can you share a bit about your career journey, starting with college? When did you know you wanted to work in sports and kind of go from there?
Yeah. All right. I want to time myself because it's 20 years working. I'm actually setting a timer right now. Okay. It is. Here we go. All right. So in college, coincidentally, ironically, I started off working in the athletics department. Had no idea that was even a career. So didn't think about it then. And then I thought I'd be a lawyer, worked at a law firm, said, nope, that's not happening. And switched to the PR department from being a legal assistant. But the law firm had a big sports practice. And when I was going to move to New York, I was asking some of the lawyers that I worked with, like, do you know who's hiring? And they said, yeah, Major League Baseball is hiring. I'm like, great. I love baseball. I grew up playing softball. The Cubs are my team. So I worked at MLB in the labor relations department. Not the right culture fit for me. Decided I wanted to get my MBA to figure out what I want to do with myself. Got into marketing that way, met classmates who worked at Major League Soccer. They said, try for a job with us. And it was going to be in the sponsorship department focused on Mexican soccer and Latino fan base. I was like, perfect. Got the job. Did that for several years, working with a bunch of brands. Left the job. It was my dream job, but left it because I had married and he was going to residency, package deal, moved to Boston, worked at a startup lacrosse team in the middle of a recession, trying to sell sponsorships. Terrible. Left sports altogether, worked in higher education for my alma mater, did alumni relations, fun. But after a couple of years, I was like, you know what? I want something a little different. Switched into venture capital. So that's where I got a little bit of the investing bug from that experience. Moved again for my husband's job. North Carolina, went to random NYU happy hour to meet people because I didn't know anybody in Charlotte. They found out my background. They're like, we've got a job for you. We just signed MLS in Mexico as sponsors. I got the job. I did that for 8 years, doing all types of everything from TV campaigns, on-site, fan zone, marketing activations, sweepstakes, blah, blah, blah. And then after almost 9-10 years, pandemic, time to reflect what I want to do. I said the next couple things I want to do is own whatever I'm doing next. I want to own a part of it. And so that brought me to Underdog. And I think I did it in 2 minutes, which is still longer than I wanted it to be, but that's it in a nutshell. So
That's awesome.
To answer the question is I fell into sports. I didn't know it was something like one could do in a career. And as you can see, I kind of zigged and zagged a lot.
That's great. I mean, I feel like we've all had interactions together and heard your background, but this time, yeah, you did a great job, very succinct and cool to see how it's woven. Yeah, not always expected, but you keep going back to it as well, right? Like I do think sometimes in sports we have that like there's a connection there that doesn't always end when we finish playing or we finish, one job to go to another.
Yeah, you're so right. I thought once I left sports altogether, I kind of thought was it. And I will say this about the industry. It does feel like out of sight, out of mind sometimes, right? And so I was convinced I was, going to go down more of a venture path and then just stumbled again into, doing sponsorship on the brand side of things versus the property side of things. But yeah, I feel like once you're in, you're in. Even if you want to leave, you're still in.
That's awesome. And in your current position, what are your daily duties? What are some things maybe you don't think students even know about in what you do?
Yeah, I mean, so the day job is with Underdog Venture Team. I'd say hybrid of market, traditional marketing agency with a sports focus, and then there is the investment piece. But I'd say most of the days are focused on the marketing side, and it's everything from. And I've got a handful of clients, everything from the McClendon Foundation, which is a nonprofit. That was founded by NACDA, the National Association for Collegiate Athletic Directors. And that's all about trying to increase diverse representation in college athletics. And so consulting there. And then Televisa Univisión, which is a Spanish network, the largest Spanish network in the world now. And it's marketing events. It's coming up with all types of everything from how do you create like the best Super Bowl hospitality experience, which is why I was up till 4 a.m. till, to creating a Latino voter event so that people on the Hill in DC, elected officials or their media buyers, understand the audience better, right? Because if they want to secure their votes. To like finding like the hottest restaurants. Like it's when you're at a startup, especially if it's young, especially if you're one of the partners, you do anything and everything. It does not matter how many years of experience. I was looking up places that have good tacos in New York, and I like a good reception spot. So if you guys want to know where to eat in New York, let me know.
Awesome. And one more follow-up on that is what do you find is maybe the most enjoyable for you in your current role, and maybe some of the biggest challenges you face?
The most enjoyable, it's always the people first. Like that's number one. Wherever I go, I have to really enjoy my team, and like everybody around me is really, really key. So I know it sounds hokey or cheesy, but that's very important to me. And then I would say the variety of whether I was a Major League sponsor working with Major League Soccer working with sponsors, or now with Underdog working with clients. I like the variety of the projects, right? So I will say I am never bored at my job. Like never. There's always something new. There's always something unexpected. So I think that's really exciting. The challenging part is definitely time management, especially when you're in, a role where you've got, I went from being the client to being the agency with clients, right? And it's a totally different dynamic. So I think that's that's not really difficult because I don't have a ton of ego, but right, you get used to like being wine and dine to the person who's like, hey, let me take you out and hope to secure some business from you, right? I think the time management piece is probably the hardest part, is when you've got a handful of different clients, and they each expect, they don't want to know that you're working with somebody else. Like they just want to know that you're focused on them. So being able to navigate that, I think, has been something I'm learning.
Wow, that is so great. I was just in class yesterday, and we had a guest speaker, and she said, if you want to work in sports, you have to like working with people, because kind of no matter what you do, you're going to be working with people. So I love that that's one of the things that you enjoy. But as you were talking about kind of the change, the shift from client to the agency side, how would you say you have evolved as a leader, or just as someone in the industry? How have you professionally evolved?
Oof. I am still learning how to delegate better. I think that's probably the biggest piece. Is I feel like, especially when you're in sports, you usually start off young and you're used to doing everything on your own, right? And so I think the evolution of me letting go and giving people more interesting responsibility, but also like the balance of like the grunt work that nobody really wants to do is hard, because I know what it's like to be in that, right? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to dump this on somebody. So I think that's the struggle for me, I would say. And then I think the other piece is like, really in this role, like especially when you're on the agency side, time is money, right? And that is, in some ways it feels arbitrary. In other ways, it's like, nope, if I spend this much time here on this project, there is a opportunity cost. I'm missing out for something else, right? And so navigating that has been tricky for me too. It's like, and when I'm excited about something, I go all in, even if it's maybe not, the biggest project, the biggest client. So I think balancing that part has been personally challenging for me. I guess I'm doing okay, but I still feel like I'm a new kid trying to figure it out.
Wow, I really appreciate that, because I read all about your background and I'm like, she has it all together. So I can appreciate the humility in that. And I think it's really relatable, like nobody really has everything figured out. We're all still learning as we go. So I love that answer. But speaking of kind of looking back in the past, what's one thing you wish you knew when you were just starting out your career?
One thing I wish I knew. I don't think this is an original answer, but definitely just given, like I said, 20 years, in a career, certainly knowing how much I should be getting paid and negotiating the salary up front. And right. I go back, I'm like, I cringe about thinking about how much money I left on the table. Right. And it's just, you can't really get that back. I would also say, one thing I wish I knew, and this doesn't really come up for me, but I think I wish more people knew this, not necessarily for me, but I wish more people knew that when you work in sports, it's not, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot. It's not fun and games all the time. You don't get all these tickets all the time. There's a certain level, if anything, there's a more expectation for you to be professional, no matter like what athletes are in front of you, what celebrities are in front of you. So I think that was never an issue for me, but I think it'd be really good for more people to kind of know that coming in. I think that would save a lot of people some, because I think it's really easy to for people to lose trust and respect and like the smallest of things. So I think that piece, I think is important for people who are interested in like joining this industry or just getting started in this industry. I think that's really key, is to kind of, just be cool, be a professional, don't come off too thirsty. And, because it will, like reputations are made in an instant. And, I think it's hard for people to come back from that. Yeah. I think that's something I've observed in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. And our industry is so small too. It's like somebody knows somebody that knows you or vice versa. So yeah, that's great. Okay. With that, did you ever experience a career setback? And if you did, how did you handle it? How did you navigate that?
Oh, setbacks. Oh yeah. And everybody says that, but I'd say the cultural fit is really important. Did not, just kind of, it's one thing to be excited about a big brand, right? And an opportunity. But then when you get there and it's just not right, it's like that taught me to do my homework and like, and what that meant, like, what does it mean to do your homework? I would say it's, if you can get a sense of who's working there, it's key. A lot of managers don't do this, which is a learning for me, which is, a lot of managers will just interview the person and they don't let that interview or that candidate meet anybody else. I think it's really important for the candidates to meet other people and, in that department they'll be working with. I think that's really, really key. And I think you will quickly get if people are excited and happy to be there. And I want that. I want to be around that. This is, every career move for me. I've never had the intention of like, okay, in 2 years, I'm going to like, this is me a stepping stone and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Like, it's like, I'm a pretty loyal person. I want to stay put. If I could stay put forever in places, I would. I haven't because, my husband moved, but like I was at Wells Fargo for 9 years. At a bank, like I would never have thought that necessarily, right? But it was a really good place to be. Anyhow, so I think that's really important. And to me, that's just like a really critical piece is trying to find out, who you're going to be working with all day is important. What other setbacks? Oh, that job after MBA school, after graduating with MBA, you're thinking 6-figure job. I was making $35,000 and all my classmates were making over 100,000. And it was, like I said, the recession in 2008. And I was not selling sponsorships. And I felt like a total failure. And to this day, like I am like very conscious of like not succeeding, back then. And And so I've said, when it comes to like trying to land new business, I've shared with my colleagues, like, look, I'm going to need help in this, like what are the tactics used? Because they make it look easy. They're like, boom, boom, boom. And I'm just like, well, I don't want to just call anybody. I want to reach out to people that I know we can help. Right. And so I have asked to have working sessions on business development because it's not an area that's of strength to me. And so 2008 was definitely more humbling than I think I usually am. What other setbacks? Oh, just like I think, I think as long, things. I think sometimes things don't work out. Like there was a sweepstakes I worked on years ago that I was really excited about, but it was like maybe only 100 people entered, and instead of being like, damn, that did not work out well, it was what's the learnings from it and apply it for the next one. And I will say, like, one of the best places I could find myself in was being at a company where my manager was like, test and learn, and not be negatively impacted by that, and just saying, hey, this is a learning opportunity. This is the first time we're trying this. Like, it's okay for it to fail. And like, so that's something I've really taken along with me throughout the years, is that it's okay to fail. And like knowing upfront, like, hey, this may not work, but let's give it a shot. And, we won't put a ton of money against it, right? There's calculated risks that you take. But that's been like really, I don't know what the right word, energizing and like confidence boosting to be able to have that opportunity to not see things work out well and then still say, all right, that was pretty terrible, but we try to address every single, it didn't work out for lack of, effort or, not being prepared or what have you. It was like, you know what, we didn't put enough money against it, like, because we didn't have X amount of budget. So I think that's been some of the challenges and some of the I guess the positive aspects that came out of those challenges.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate just the transparency, right? Like, we all go through setbacks to some degree, whatever they look like, whether they're financial or career or the stepping stones or whatever, and I think it's easy, like Jessica said, that, looking at your resume to be like, she's got it all together. It's been so easy. And like, look where she is and how impactful she in her work. And, so yeah, we just appreciate that. Yeah. Those are so many nuggets too, whether it's like knowing the culture of the business you're stepping into, to going like, sometimes it doesn't work out. It's not necessarily your fault, but like, you can learn from it and creating an environment, even as a manager, to say like, we can have space to grow and not just look at the bottom line and say, okay, that wasn't worth it. I think it's really, really powerful to hear, like, personally. And then I think for our students, just to know that the journey isn't always linear, and it doesn't not have bumps and hard times. So yeah, just want to acknowledge that first. And then we just love to hear some of the best resources that have helped you along the way. Yeah.
Well, if you can see behind me, I've got lots of books. But I can't look, I like to read fiction. That's that when I'm reading, like that's my go-to, because that's usually what I do to unwind. But that said, I try to read as much major news, written word as possible, because I feel like there's a lot of learnings that can be done. There's some patterns that you wind up seeing. You don't realize it sometimes. Like, I'm not necessarily reading to identify patterns, but there's something that will pop up. So I'm trying to think, for example, like, I remember the first time I heard about Google was, I think, in 1999, before it really became a big thing. And it was just like a little blurb in Time magazine. And I was like, that looks really interesting. And that, now it's like this giant behemoth. So I feel like kind of looking and reading about what's new, especially in maybe some, like I said, and not necessarily like the news. I feel like whenever something pops up on TV, it's usually kind of established, but something in the daily newspapers or even LinkedIn, I think, is really, like, that's a big piece of learning for me too. I'm trying to think of what else are some other ones. I think, there are some venture capital. I think VentureBeat is one. publications or media outlets that have like, this is what's up and coming. And sometimes you can identify patterns that way, right? AI was, you know, was like a hot topic this last year, but that was, you know, being talked about like, let's say 5 years ago. So yeah, I'd say that's the biggest piece. Oh, and Twitter, although Twitter is garbage now, Twitter has been a big resource to me because I would aggregate all my news there. I started off using Twitter as a news aggregator. And then it developed into listening to what I thought were either unique voices or expert voices on Twitter. And so I learned a ton from there. I've actually done a ton of business. I shouldn't say ton, but I've got maybe at least 2 or 3 business relationships just from meeting somebody on Twitter, and then evolved to like LinkedIn, and then it grew from there. So yeah, those are my big pieces. I'd say business school, there's one class I thought was, you know, wonderful and was like worth the price of tuition, but I don't always go back to my notes or my business school textbooks. So yeah, I'd say, you know, business news as much as possible, and Twitter if it can ever get back to what it was before.
Awesome. And pivoting into the people who've been influential in your life. So who are 3 people who you feel like have been incredibly influential for you, and specifically around your career trajectory?
Yeah, although he's been disruptive to my career trajectory, my husband. So he's actually been like my biggest mentor, and he's been my biggest mentor since we were 18 years old. Only because he's somebody who's always been very ambitious and always thinking like 10 steps ahead, whereas I am that person that's like in the moment and not really thinking beyond, you know, what's in front of me sometimes. So he's been, you know, he's my sounding board for everything career-wise first. Then I have another friend who is formerly in the HR recruiting talent acquisition space. So he's a recruiter at Nike, Francisco, and he's been a sounding board and a mentor for me since my days at MLB. When I was like, oh, this is maybe not the right fit for me. He was somebody I can talk to. And he was the one that convinced me during the pandemic that I was a little too comfortable in my job. I'd been there for 8 years, and he's like, I think it's time for you to try something new. And that really, really like sunk in. And then the last person I would say is myself. So I go with my gut a lot of times. And, you know, when I was graduating from college, I had 3 job opportunities in front of me. One was at a nonprofit. One was at a real estate research firm, and one was at this law firm. And so I thought about going to law school, but the real estate company was offering a lot more money, and the nonprofit seemed a little bit disorganized. And I can go with the flow, but I need a little bit of structure to play with. And money. I don't know why it's never been it's a motivator, but it's not the biggest motivator for me, although it should be. I went with the law. It just felt right. You know, you get to a place and just clicks. And so like, I would say my gut, my intuition has usually been right. There's out of 20 years and many jobs, I've only regretted one. And it was because I think I let the ego piece of like the excitement of like, you know, a sports brand like lure me in versus like my gut saying these people don't seem happy. My gut saying you're redoing work that's maybe not great. And but I was just so like enamored with that I thought, oh, maybe it's not, like my gut was saying, I don't know, but my ego was like, yes, get it. So that's my answer there.
That's great.
My ego was wrong.
I really hope our students connect with that, because I know I teach advanced career preparation, and so often they mention not feeling confident or kind of not trusting. And I get it, you know, they're just starting out in their careers. But I think there's so much wisdom in what you're saying to trust your gut. There are just certain things that we kind of know, and we just need to be kind of in tune with those internal alert systems that go off, like you're mentioning. So a lot has happened, even in the last 4 years since COVID. But with that, how would you say you've seen your industry grow or change? And kind of where do you think it's going?
Yeah. I think, I don't know where it's going. Like I said, I'm not the, 5 years ahead person, but in the moment, I think a lot more So certainly, leveraging technology, right, to offer fans access to, whatever, I mean, NFTs are now like out of, they're not in vogue anymore, right? That's out, but that was like an option, right? Using technology as a way to say, I've got this, this piece that nobody else has. For a while was exciting. I think, right, NBA Top Shot was doing really, really well. I don't know where some of those values are now for some of those cards. I'm gonna look them up just because I'm curious. So I think that's a big piece. It's like how, I've always been a fan of how do you customize experiences, and it's tough because they're not always scalable. But I just remember this one. It's years ago now, before pandemic, but there was the U.S. Soccer did. I think it was a 2018 World Cup where you can enter your name online and they would do a custom jersey with your name on the back of it. And it was such a beautiful, like really easy, like so simple, but like you can have that, that's somebody's screensaver for, life, for example, or on their phone or what have you. It was like really, really neat. I don't know what's next. I know so much money is being spent on all these stadiums and having the stadium, high tech experiences of fans. You're seeing a lot more, stadiums with like being a destination. So it's not just game day. Maybe you're doing a tour. Maybe you're having lunch there. Like in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz, you can just go and eat at the restaurant. Like that's open, I think 7 days a week. So it's becoming that utilization or the optimization of those spaces, I think is really has taken off. I don't know what else. What do you guys see? I'm curious. I'm sorry to turn it around on you, or what? Like I don't know what have your students said.
We recently took a trip to the Tampa Bay Rays. And for me, it was like the most sophisticated technology I had seen. But they were telling us about these shops that they have. And apparently the students were more familiar than I was, that you can just kind of like put stuff in your basket and it just charges you and you don't have to stand in line. And I'm like, I do think that makes the fan experience so much better. And so little things like that to just connect with your, what you were saying about technology. I just feel like things are becoming more and more convenient at sporting events.
Yes, more convenient, right? And they're doing it so great and seamlessly, right? They're extracting more dollars from us as a result. So
yes,
it's smart. It's smart. I'm not that, mastermind, but good for them.
And stuff like that always works on me, like commercials. I'm like, oh, I don't have to do it. Let me try it. And it's like, I think I'm just trying it out, but I'm being charged just like everyone.
Correct, exactly. It's like maybe so it's cool. Like the digital version of the gift card, right? Whether it's an analog, plastic piece, and you're like, you know what? I've got a $50 gift card, but I'm going to spend $60, right?
Right, exactly. It always works. I am the consumer. So do you have any suggestions for students that are maybe hoping to land a position that you're in, on how they can get there, or how they can prepare themselves for those types of positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think they know that competition is fierce, right? So how do they stand out? And I think, there's tons of ways to do that. The first piece is what any, recruiter is going to, or any hiring manager is going to look at as a resume, right? So how do you stand out there? And it doesn't, from everything from a nice format, which is key, right? It's like pleasant to the eye, especially if you want to go into marketing or design, it's important. But then the substance of like what that resume says. And I feel like I look at resumes on a weekly basis. And I remember the first time I wrote a resume, my husband, who was not my husband at the time, but we were college students. And I just remember like being in tears. I'm like, I haven't done anything. I don't know what I'm doing. This resume sucks. And he's like, and he would just talk me through everything I would do on my like student athlete. I was not a student athlete. Sorry. At my, athletics department job. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, you engage with, customers, so to speak, or you, help, he was able to mold something I didn't think was like really exciting into something like, oh, that does sound better. Right. And so I think really digging in deep, and you absolutely have to have multiple somebodies review your resume and talk to you through each bullet point, it's so time consuming up front. But once you get over that kind of initial, I don't know, like data dump of what you do, then you refine it and it just becomes so much easier after that. But I think that's really, I mean, I look at, I mean, I'm not even looking for jobs. I probably look at my resume, I don't know, every other month just to say, do I have the latest on here? So it's really easy to forget or kind of track your, if you're like, oh, I'm not going to do the resume now, just kind of track your wins, right? I think that's really key. And even if, sometimes, even if you're not looking for a position, somebody's going to come find you. And so you want to be ready for that. Let's see what else. Definitely stay current. So, there's tons of great sports business media outlets out there. I mean, there's so many more now than there ever was. Everything from SBJ to Sportico. I like the sports business aspect of things rather than the on-field stuff. As much as like I love soccer, I'm not going to be able to tell you what the game score was like, from 2 days ago and like who scored and everything like that. I'm not going to remember these stats, but I am paying attention to the signage, like what's that sponsor doing, or that creative on the billboard was really interesting, or who's on the kit, who's on the soccer jersey and why. Anyhow, so definitely talk to lots of people. Definitely be current on news, read the general news, and just talk to folks when you don't need anything. I think you guys have probably stressed that a lot to your students. Like, it's very apparent when conversations are transactional, and it's really, and I have them all the time, but it's disappointing. There are students I've met 15 years ago who still keep in touch with me just to check in and say hi. And those are the ones that I am seeing actually go far in their own careers, even if they don't need anything from me. I think that's really key. I think LinkedIn is really important, even if you don't post regularly, which you should. If you haven't, again, don't post just to post, but you should be on LinkedIn pretty often, following people that have careers that you're interested in, but just liking and commenting on people's posts, I think is really important. Like, you want to, like I said, I feel sometimes when you're out of sports, you're out of sight, out of mind. And so you want to be the first person people think about when there is an opening or something to share or get an invitation or who knows what. But I think that engagement is really piece and important for all the ills of social media, right? There's so many great things about it at least in this industry that I've seen and experienced. Everything from, like I said, doing business to building new friendships. What started off as maybe this sounds weird, but there's somebody I've admired on Twitter who I think is really sharp and was a writer for Anthony Bourdain's show. And so we've never met, but we're going to go to a show next week in Chicago, just because we've got some shared interests and in politics, and so like, that's exciting. So I don't know, I think, and I do think it's important to like be outside of the sports business bubble or sports bubble and look at entertainment, look at academia, look at business, technology, because I think ideas definitely come from everywhere, and just people are interesting. I think people are interesting. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a great story. It doesn't matter who it is. There's always a really good story to tell, and you just have to care enough to like dig for it.
That's awesome. No, I love that. I mean, I just think, you're just hearing your excitement about it and how relational you are. Obviously, this is just a glimpse of you and your story, but if I could say anything to our audience, would be like, Sara is amazing, has amazing energy and really relational, and has, all of those like giftings in that in particular, which, as you said, is what it makes like it work in the sports world, right? Like, we talk about, having relationships and not being transactional is really important. And I think that is what is hard for our students to understand. And I don't blame it totally on their generation. I am curious about the online communication being normal, from just texting rather than calling to just interacting on a screen. But I do think for you, like, just having those relational skills is going to take you far in and of itself in the industry, outside of even the academic knowledge and the giftings and marketing and things like that. Yeah. So that's really helpful to hear.
Yeah. And, as you were saying that, so once you have more experience. I'm not going to say age, but once you have more experience, more people like reach out to you asking for advice and guidance and and I think being a good communicator on top of that is really important. Like being a great writer. Somebody said, Sarah, I want to introduce you to, somebody's grandchild that I want to help. And I'm like, okay, here we go, and I was like, sure, of course. But this student reached out to me, and it was short, but like just really thoughtful email that made me really excited to talk to this person. And I hadn't felt like that in a while. On part, it's like I said, you see a lot of these and you can tell who's transactional. And I was like, be that person that somebody's excited to talk to rather than somebody who's going to be like, people want to help out. Like everybody wants to help out. Nobody wants to be a jerk, but it is time consuming to be helpful. Like it really is time consuming. And so be that person that somebody's be excited to help you out versus doing something, versus being kind of like the favor for somebody else. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So where this person, was initially the favor, I'm just like, I can't wait to like talk to this person again. Just because their short email was so thoughtful and it was researched and was, humble, and they, and they also kind of knew what they wanted out of the conversation. So anyway, being a good communicator, and that takes work. And, I think some people are natural at it, and then some people need some more help with it.
Yeah. And I would add, and in that you've even named it, like they did their research, they had it short, they know you're, because you're busy, right? So like, again, knowing the details and how to even interact with people in positions like yours is super important, and not being generic. I think that's the straight giveaway of like, this is transactional and we're going through the motions.
Yeah, that's a great one. Don't be generic.
So going into it a little bit specific, as far as for those students who want to get into the marketing and sponsorship, is there, what are some important things, and maybe you could just name one or two that you feel like in your work specifically, what are things, maybe things that they can work on, have experience in, or look for those experiences before they even start getting into the industry that you think would be really helpful? Yeah.
Well, Jess was talking about her experience as a consumer, right? She's like, damn, the ad got me, right? I think especially when you're watching sports, right? We use the breaks to get up and go do something, right? I'd say sit there and like watch the advertising that comes up. And again, start seeing if you can identify patterns in whatever, if it's like, wow, there was a time where you saw a lot of crypto ads, right? And so like that was a pattern, or, there's a lot of financial mobile app, that was a time when, well, that was years ago now, but like you would say like, oh, everybody's now shifting to encourage people to do their, transactions online. I think that's really important piece. I think, just think about, you as a consumer, everybody is a consumer, whether it's the fast food place that you need to go to, or where you can get your shoes or whatever, and just kind of take it in. And I probably should do that a little bit more as well. But I think kind of be observant of like what is prompting you to do XYZ. I remember, and there's some marketers, and I am not an inherent marketer. I didn't have classical marketing training, which I do feel self-conscious about or not as secure about, where I interviewed at Johnson & Johnson. And that's like when you're in business school, like Johnson & Johnson is like one of the big brands that you're like, it's a coveted internship. And I got the interview, and in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't get the internship, but two, it was just so clear that at that moment in time, I just didn't know what it really meant to be a marketer. And like marketers, especially whether you're on the team side or the league side or the brand side, you want to feel like so immersed in like the kind of activities of like what it means to market, that you're thinking about everything. You're thinking about like this, banner ad or this paid social post or this TV commercial, and like how is it getting from that to somebody putting down their happened there. There we go.
We got you back.
Sorry, so I don't know where we lost you there, but
could you hear me?
being immersed, I think, and
Yes.
just all the elements of, you go to a stadium and you see the marketing bands, what happens in between of breaks or the seventh inning or whatever, how they're starting to utilize that across the stadium, maybe not necessarily just sitting and watching the game and seeing the players, and like you have a very different angle, or marketers do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's actually, you've probably heard this before, maybe your students have, like, once you get the marketing, once you're into the marketing side of sports, you're not really watching a game ever again. It's all about the business of like the sport. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that winds up being like, it's like a whole, like you're in the matrix, you're seeing all these things that most fans are not really realizing is happening around you. But I'd say start paying attention to that. You'll never come out of it, but
but you've landed in the right spot if you enjoy that, right?
Correct.
Because that's where you're going to be.
Shelly, that's perfect. That's how you know you're in the right spot. That's exactly right.
So going back to you a little bit, would love to know this, you've kind of named like your industry is high paced, high demand. What do you do to stay healthy in the sports industry?
Oh, I don't have a good answer for that. Especially not after my all-nighter yesterday, right? So I was saying earlier, I was like, I was up till 4 working on like multiple things. I definitely, people talk about working out. I'll try and do that as often as I can. But even like just walking outside for a second and like grounding is important, and just breathing. And like I said, I do read a ton of fiction just to decompress. That's usually what I do before, they say don't bring your electronic readers to bed, but I do that and it'll help me fall asleep. But that's, I think reading something that's just light, nothing heavy either, really helps me just relax and be able to have a mostly good night's sleep. Definitely talking to people is really key. Gosh, we talked about time management being a struggle. I've from a productivity standpoint, I've learned that while I love to-do lists, I love checking stuff off. It's better if I calendar what I need to do, right? So it's like 9 o'clock, respond to these emails, 10 o'clock, call this client to follow up on the contract, 11 o'clock, review whatever, this news story. So I've realized that I learned that probably a good like 15 years into my career. So I wish I learned it earlier, but that seems to work for me. So I think kind of, and then I don't know, everybody's got like a different approach to like when to just turn off. Like, I don't know what that is for me. I mean, I do turn off, don't get me wrong, because I'm not trying to like work myself like crazy, like in my 20s and my 40s, because my body can't handle it anymore. But I just know at some point where I'm like, you know what, I can let this go for the rest of the day and just pick it back up tomorrow. I don't know. It's just like some internal, again, I guess maybe back to my gut says it's okay to let this go. But yeah, work out when I can. I wish it was more often. It's not. Reading like, fun fiction, walking outside and just like breathing is good. Yeah.
Breathing is always great advice. But I have read things about how like literally deep breathing kind of regulates our bodies and can get us to normal levels. So, I mean, it's an understated tip. So yeah. I appreciate that. You mentioned kind of what you wish you had known as you started out in your career. What suggestions would you have for students who are just getting started to help them with the hiring process? What qualifications do you look for? What kind of applicant are you looking to bring on?
Yeah, I would say, I think if there's I think the toughest part, right, for anybody is like getting the break in, right? Or getting that first piece. I don't love saying volunteer, because a lot of us, if we're talking, one of the things I mentioned was diversifying the industry a bit more. And so, to say, to volunteer for sports positions, I think there are opportunities. I think they're tough to find, but you can find, you should be able to find some, and maybe it's not the biggest brand on that's out there, but there should be some ways that there's at least, it doesn't have to, you don't have to get paid, thousands, but just something that pays, right? I think it's really important. Like this whole like work for free stuff, I really struggle with because there's a lot of, it basically excludes a lot of people, right? And I think that's really unfortunate. And and I know a lot of teams like, oh, we can get an intern for free, and I'm just like, no, we've got to set a tiny bit, a stipend, something, because it's not fair because there's a lot of people we don't get as a result. So anyway, sorry, I got off on a different soapbox there. But I would say, look for paid opportunities where possible, even if they're short term. It could just be $20 an hour as a brand ambassador for a day, at some event. I think that's a really, that could be a really good way to do it. And I will say, if like brand ambassadors, a lot of sports teams, brand events hire them. And all you really need is like being on time, having a great attitude, and just being willing to say, how else can I help? Those are the three things that you can do to be a great brand ambassador, and you'll continue to get hired. And what's great about the brand ambassador role is you kind of have like a behind the scenes look about what is it that the brand is trying to do in that moment for the fan or the consumer. And so I think that could be, and I feel like brand ambassadors, they need everywhere, right? It doesn't have to be, just at the Super Bowl or some like big event. So that might be a one way to break in. I'd say if you write for, if you're on LinkedIn and you have insightful posts, I think that could be a way to get a lot of people's attention. Maybe you do that in conjunction with your class. So it's not, it's not just a labor of love, but you are getting some type of, I don't know what the right word is, reward for it or recognition for that. But I think there's, something, if you've got an interesting point of view, share. It doesn't have to be, a thesis on LinkedIn, but just some, sharing an insightful article or what your viewpoint is on one. I think that's another way to get noticed. What else? Again, just be present, show up to things. I think it's also cool. Nothing is going to fall in your lap. I mean, maybe depending on who you are, maybe, but for the most part, it's a grind to get noticed. And so what are some of the things that you can help get started? I think it's reading, it's talking about what you're learning. It's, finding those roles that give you glimpses of what being in this industry mean. Again, try to avoid the volunteer roles. I mean, they're there, they happen. Like I know, especially at big organizations, like maybe it is a volunteer role, but they give you like tons of swag, and maybe afterwards you can sell it. I don't know, but there's got to be some type of compensation in some way. Besides like, oh, you'll get the experience. Like again, yes, but it's exclusive. So I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
I think so. I think that's very helpful. I wish I had known those things when I was getting started. So I think that's great. And for our listeners that maybe want to connect with you beyond just watching this video, what is the best way? Is it through LinkedIn? Is it through email? How should they connect with you?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn is one way, Twitter is another way. And then Jess and Shelly, through you guys too. You've got my info. And if you're just like, hey, this is somebody we're excited about and we think you should meet. I trust your judgment for sure. I know we've chatted before, and I've really enjoyed our conversations. It's apparent, like, again, you can tell there are people who just like exude their excitement about the industry, and those are the ones like I want to meet. And I'm also okay meeting people who don't know exactly what they want, but there's got to be like passion there. Like, I'm not really sure all these things excite me. That's great. I want to meet those people.
Oh, we can't hear you, Jess.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. I said that. I love that. I love that. That they can connect with you on LinkedIn, and we can for sure, we're happy to pass along names as well. I think we mentioned off screen that we'd like to do a rapid fire Q&A with our guests. So I think it's time for
Okay.
that. So Shelly will take us
Yes.
through our rapid
Why?
fire Q&A.
Why am I more nervous about this than the other questions? All right, here we go.
Because you didn't have them ahead of time, maybe. Okay, so 1 minute's on the clock, and I will ask questions. They're called fire away for a reason. I will fire them away. Whatever comes to you first off, just go ahead and say it, or you can pass if you don't want to answer. So we will get. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's start. All right. So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Ooh, artist.
Favorite sport to play?
Softball.
What's the worst haircut you've ever had?
Oh God, chin length. I look like a cotton ball.
Okay, name 2 daily habits.
Oh God, Twitter and snacking while I'm on calls.
Favorite zoo animal?
Koala.
Okay. What was the last book you read?
Oh, Windfall.
First job?
Math tutor in high school.
Mountains or beaches?
Oh, beaches.
Favorite type of food?
Arab, Middle Eastern.
And last one, favorite holiday? Okay, I can pick another one. What phone app do you waste the most time on?
Twitter.
There you go.
That was so great. I enjoyed that a lot. Your reactions. That was awesome.
How do I not have a favorite holiday? What's wrong with me?
Oh gosh, that's so funny. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time to just share your professional endeavors. We always say this, but we're certain that the UF sport management students, our faculty, our alumni, that everybody just really appreciates and values your thoughts and insights today. And so we always tell our listeners to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're at UFSPM. And we are your hosts, Jessica Francis.
And Shelly Lyle. And
Go
Gators!
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. This was fun.
So much.